I've really been looking forward to this discussion. This is, as you saw, if you're here for the first time and you saw our normal topics, our regular topics, they all seem to relate to more to sort of elder care topics and issues. And I'm really excited about this because our number one topic, I would say our number one topic is solo aging. Our number two topic is what to do with our stuff. And I think you're going to see how sort of mapping your family tree is can really work in alignment with downsizing, making a move, and yeah, not to mention it can be a really great hobby. And I never understood how genealogy could be a hobby until I got into it a little bit myself. But today we have to help us understand this, we have Melanie Thomas, who is a genetic genealogist, amongst some other very interesting things. And we are going to dive into this topic and better understand it. So, Melanie, great to have you here today. Before we dive into the topic of genealogy, tell us a little bit about your background and what led to this being something that you help people with.
Sure, absolutely. So first, when you and I talked about stuff, I said, oh, well, what I always tell people is I come from a long line of hoarders. I really do. And as we all know, it's genetic, so I feel like it's not my fault. But what I'm particularly weak about, my big weakness in the keeping stuff is family things, not even family heirlooms, just anything that's like, oh, this belonged to my grandfather. Oh, they used this at the service station. I love all the family stuff and all the old clothes. And I really struggled to let those go. And what I love about genetic genealogy, or genealogy in general, but genetic genealogy even more so, is that just like those things, it helps illuminate the stories of my family and where I come from and where they came from and what they went through. And so I really do think there's a big link between why I care about these things and why I care about this information. I ended up getting into this after a 30-year career doing something entirely different. I'm actually a CPA and was a management consultant. But one year my kids wanted to do ancestry to find out where we're from. I said, okay, I can tell you where we're from, but fine. We did it. And I learned so much, like so things I never thought I was going to learn. And I taught myself how to do what I do now, which is genetic genealogy. And when I took early retirement from my job, I turned this into my new job. So as a genetic genealogist, I help, and my business partner, Tynan Peterson, she's on this call listening today. We both started in different ways, but I started by helping myself and then helping adoptees figure out who their parents were, ultimately volunteering with a group that worked on cold cases. And now Tynan and I have our own company and we solve crimes for the police.
Wow. Yeah, that's like the dream of, I mean, my daughter would love to, I should have told her to tune in because she's like, yeah, I want to be one of these forensic people, that I'd see on TV. And I've never met anybody who does that. So this is pretty cool.
Yeah,
Well,
great.
we have time. Maybe we'll talk about, maybe you can talk about what it's like to do a cold
Sure.
case or something like that. But let's dive into the discussion. I know you've got a slide deck,
I do.
and but I want to remind folks is that if you've got any questions at any point in time during the discussion, just type them in or raise your hand, and then Melanie, if you want to take a break or two and just
Sure.
check in with
Yeah.
me. But if anything comes up on that's really relevant, I may pop
Yeah,
in.
please. I'd rather this be interactive. So please put your
Got it.
questions in, have Steve cut me off. And I'm going to ask a couple questions now, and I don't know how to get the answers. So you figure that out, Steve. I would love to know how many people here have built their family trees and researched their own family histories already.
Actually, here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this as a poll,
Okay.
because a lot of times that is easier for people
Okay.
to
I have two
respond.
questions. One, who's researched their family and has a big family history, and who's taken an at-home DNA test? Those are my two questions.
Okay, so if you want to get started,
Sure.
I'm gonna okay.
Okay.
So let's
Yeah, if
see
you can
here.
find that out for me, we'll be in good
Yep.
shape. Okay, let me share my screen.
And I'm gonna get this. So it's who I have researched my family tree and then genetic DNA and those genetic
taking a DNA test like Ancestry or 23andMe or anything like that. Because that's really what we're going to be talking about today.
Test. Okay. All right. So I'm going to put that up and hopefully we'll run that, have you for a little bit here.
That'd be great.
And I'll, so if you, I'm getting that loaded up, and then if you want, let's see, I hope this is.
Yeah, just let me know when we have an answer.
Whoops, wrong poll.
Okay, I'll start talking. If we get
some. Yeah, you just start talking. Yeah.
Okay. So what we're going to talk about today, hi everybody, nice to meet you. I'm Melanie, as I said, and we're going to be talking about genetic genealogy. What is it and why you might be interested in doing this, which would require taking an at-home DNA test. They're kind of the same thing. So let's talk about what we're going to go through today. So what is it? Why would you want to take a DNA test, or why would you not want to take one? What do you need to know before you dive in about DNA, family relationships? How do you analyze your results once you get them? And this will be a speed genetic genealogy lesson. And what else can you do with this information once you have it? So I think everybody here probably knows, but Tynan and I do a lot of lectures, different places, different conferences. So we like to walk through the definitions. So first of all, genealogy, as you all know, study of families using, I'm going to point out, historical records. DNA didn't used to be possible. It was all about the records to figure out who you're related to, what the relationship is, and build your family trees and family history. Genetic obviously relates to genes or heredity. And so genetic genealogy combines the information you get from these at-home DNA tests with traditional genealogical research. And with those two pieces, what I love about it is that it enhances this story. You can do it with records, but once you have the DNA, you might learn different things, and it really helps illuminate new information, enhances your family's history and stories. And genetic genealogy is most often used to identify an adoptee's parents, or somebody who doesn't know who their father is, identify their father, and solve cold cases. There are lots of other uses, which we will talk about, but this is what it's most often used for. And you'll hear other terms. You'll hear forensic genealogy, forensic genetic genealogy, investigative genetic genealogy. Most of those are the same thing. It's just the same methodology we're going to teach you today, but in a legal context.
Okay, and then I kind of screwed up on that poll because I didn't.
Don't worry about it. It's okay.
I didn't add a no response question, but based on the results, I would say about half of the audience have either researched their family tree or taken a genetic test, maybe a little bit less, since I didn't have a no.
So for some of you, this is going to be about why would you want to or not want to take a test? And for those who have taken it, it's going to be a little bit more about what to do with those results. Okay, so again, genetic genealogy combines traditional genealogical research with your DNA test results to come up with a more wholesome story of your family. So why would you want to do it? I think the most common reason people do it, and you see it in all the ancestry ads, is to learn about your ethnicity or nationality. Other reasons to figure out who your ancestors were if you don't know, learn more about those people, solve family mysteries. I say confirm family myths. I was always told I was related to the actor Jimmy Stewart, and one of the first things I did was set out to prove whether that was true or not, and it is. But there's lots of things you're told growing up, and this is a way to go figure out if those things are true or not. Find missing relatives. Tynan and I have done this for a couple people. Find people that had gone missing, figure out where they are, find their descendants. Find out what you don't know, but mostly enhance your knowledge and illuminate family stories and history. Okay, reasons you might not want to do it. So you may learn things you didn't know and don't want to know. And so I tell people up front, don't test if you're not prepared to learn the truth. A shocking number of people take the test and find out their father isn't their father, or their grandfather isn't their grandfather, which is what happened to me. I got my list of people I'm related to and went, who are these people? Because one of my grandfathers isn't, which was a huge shock. So this is called an NPE. We'll use this term. It's a non-paternal event or a non-parental event or a not parent expected. It means all those things. People do their DNA and get the results back and go, wait a minute, I'm not related to the people I'm supposed to be. So that happens frequently. So we tell people, again, don't test if you don't want to know. You may discover other surprises. I had someone who wanted to learn how to do this. The first person on her list was a half sibling. Her mother had a child and put him up for adoption, and they never knew. So they found him in their DNA matches. So you just never know what you're going to find in there. Criminals, raging alcoholics, children put up for adoption. You just don't know what's in there. And then some people are afraid, if I do this, and we'll talk about a little bit, but if I do this and law enforcement looks at my data, are they going to arrest my cousin for a crime? Well, if your cousin committed a crime, maybe. Like I tell people, if my cousin is a murderer, I'm okay with that. But you might not be. So these are some things to think about. You may get some surprises. All right, so what do you need to know before we jump in? This is going to be a quick DNA lesson. How is DNA shared? What are centimorgans? Why do you care? What's a 1C1R, and how many grandparents you have? So quick DNA sharing lesson, which we all remember from taking biology in high school, right? That a child gets 50% of their DNA from their parent, but different children inherit different pieces. So people say you share 50% with your parents, 50% with your children, and 50% with your siblings. But that's not really right for your siblings because you didn't get the same 50% from each parent. So it's less than that. And a grandchild gets 25%. But as you can see by our favorite chart, the gummy bear chart, each of these kids at each generation is inheriting different parts. By the time you get down to the group at the bottom, like they have very different pieces of the green, the red, and the white, right? The second one doesn't have any of the white gummy bear, neither does the third. So the amount of DNA you inherit, we can say these percentages, but it really ranges. And the further away you get, the more of a range there is. So let's talk about this. The reason we care is if you do a DNA test, you're going to get back, with most of the companies, you will get back a number that tells you how many centimorgans of DNA you share. So you have 23 chromosomes, and you share certain pieces of those chromosomes with your genetic relatives. Each little chunk we call a segment, and the length or the size of that chunk is a number of centimorgans. So when you look, and we're going to use Ancestry as our example today simply because it's the most popular. If you look at Ancestry, it will say you share 342 centimorgans over 5 segments. Okay, so this example at the bottom, there's a 9 centimorgan chunk and an 11 centimorgan chunk. So that's 20 centimorgans over 2 segments. Okay. In those systems or in those databases, it's also going to then say, oh, you share 300 centimorgans, you're half first cousins. It doesn't mean you're half first cousins. They're estimating based on a number of centimorgans. The important thing to look at is the centimorgans, because most numbers of centimorgans could be lots of different relationships, not just one. And those databases also usually estimate in terms of cousins. People are like, that's not my cousin, that's my aunt. Yes, it absolutely, but that's just the way they term it based on their estimates. So what you care about is the centimorgans. So we need to understand those a little bit better. Okay. Here you have the relationship on the left and then the percentage of shared DNA. We talked about parent-child is 50%. Full sibling or fraternal twin is kind of 50%, not quite. Grandparent, grandchild, aunt, uncle, that's 25%. So if you go to the average CM share, assuming you have 6,800 total, right? You share about 3,500 with a parent or a child, 34 to 3,500, because you're giving about half. A full sibling comes in around 25 or 2,600, right? And you can see these percentages translate into centimorgan numbers, except for the full sibling one doesn't really work. I'm going to stop for a second and make sure this makes sense.
Okay, let me just take a quick glance at any questions that may have come up on that.
Okay.
And I think everybody's saying that it's fascinating. We've got oh, there was a question earlier on. Can genetic genealogy be used to examine DNA for health concerns?
There are some, yes, some of the sites also give you health information, and there's another site where you can upload your results to get better health information. It's not, I guess I would argue, it's not going to be 100% accurate, but there's certainly things you can learn from it.
Okay.
Right,
And then,
like I can go in and it'll tell me I can't roll my tongue, but I can roll my tongue. So that's not it. But there are some databases that will focus more on, do you have the BRCA gene? Do you have other things? And there's some useful information in there.
okay. And then here we go. Okay. So Susan says, is there a difference between female and male since females only get the female chromosomes?
In what we're looking at here, it's called autosomal DNA. It's a great question. This is autosomal DNA that everybody has. Some of the databases will also tell you if you match someone on the X chromosome. There's also mitochondrial DNA. There's Y DNA for the men. There's a variety of other tests. This that most of these tests use and that we focus on is autosomal, and it's the same for everybody.
Okay. And then let's see. Okay, I think this relates to this slide here. I'm just going to read it here. It's Joy asks, if your relatives married siblings, it can be higher. My 2C and 3C from 2 brothers and 2 sisters who married is much higher. They look like 2C. So if siblings or other relatives are involved, the CMs can be higher than expected.
That's absolutely right. In fact, I used to have that on one of the slides, but I thought, don't complicate it, Melanie. Check it off. But it's a great point, Joy. Absolutely true. Because if someone is related in 2 different ways, the numbers will be higher because you got some centimorgans from each of those ways.
Great. And I'm going to copy that one into chat just so that everybody can see that one. And then another one just came in. Please explain the word centimajorian again. It's a little hard to follow without understanding what this word is.
So if you go look up, it's a great question, but if you go look up centimorgan on Wikipedia, I don't even understand their answer. It's because it's the science. I don't care. What it means to me is, it's like, pretend it's centimeters, like, or inches. It's the length of that piece of DNA you share. Is it a small length? Is it a big chunk? It's the length of that segment that you share.
Great. Okay. And then, okay, we'll do one last question, then we'll get you back on. It's Linda says, can this testing make clarification for LGBTQ or those on the boundaries of uncertainty?
No, because this is autosomal. It's the same for everybody. It has nothing to do with gender. And in fact, when you go in your DNA matches, you have no idea which side of the family you're on. You only know if they're male or female based on how they identified themselves.
Okay, great. All right, well, let's keep on going. This is really fascinating.
Okay. Oh, so the last column, probability of not sharing. This is also true, or important. People will go, okay, my first cousin tested, but we don't match. They are not your first cousin. That is a fact. So if you look on the right-hand column, a second cousin or closer has never been shown to not share DNA with you, with someone, right? If they're a second cousin or closer, you must share DNA. Now, once you get to half second cousin, there's a 0.1% chance you don't share DNA, which means it's probably been seen once. Okay, and we're going to get to it, but all this data is crowdsourced based on what people have seen. So these things shift a little bit. It is quite possible to not share DNA with a third or fourth cousin. It's rare, but like I have a known fourth cousin, we don't share any DNA. It's unusual, but it's certainly possible. But from second cousin forward, it's never happened in that anyone has found. So it's an important point because a lot of people test, back to my thing about surprises, and say, well, my first cousin tested and we don't match, but blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, but that means somebody's family tree doesn't look the way they thought it did. Okay, the cousin explainer, my very favorite. Okay, if we were all in a room, I'd make you raise your hands and tell me who knows what your first cousin once removed is. Because incredibly, most people don't. Or well, not incredibly, I guess. I would say, what is your first cousin's child to you? And most people will say second cousin, but that's not accurate. If you look at the cousin explainer, you can see you are on the left. And you and your sister or brother share a parent or parents. You and a first cousin share grandparents. Your first cousin's child is down one generation, and that's your first cousin once removed. Their child is your first cousin twice removed. But your child and your first cousin's child, they are second cousins. So it's just an important concept because the centimorgans change for half relationships, right? So if you share one parent, you're half siblings. If you share two, you're full. Same with grandparents. If you share one grandparent, you're half first cousins. If you share two, you're full first cousins. And the centimorgans change for half and removes quite a bit. So those are important concepts as we go through. And then on the right, I like to show this because when we're doing genetic genealogy, like when Tanya and I are trying to solve a crime, and we have two people that we think might be third cousins, but we don't know how they're related. If you're third cousins, you share second great-grandparents. Each of these people has 16 second great-grandparents. In order for us to figure out how two people are related, we build both of their trees back, all those generations, to 32 great-grandparents to figure out which ones are the same ones, right? If I want to figure out how they're third cousins, I got to find the matching second great-grandparents. That's a lot of people. That's all the lines and all the people to get back to 16 second great-grandparents for each of them. So doing genetic genealogy can be a lot of work. And that's the whole point of this, because sometimes we go back much further. That's thousands of people we're researching just to find the one that's the same. Okay, this is our Bible. This is at a website called DNApainter.com, which is at the top. It's a shared centimorgan project. I told you it was crowdsourced, sorry. And this is put together by a man named Blaine Bettinger, who's a genetic genealogist. People submit information to him of the centimorgans they've seen for documented relationships. So on each of these squares, I don't know how well you can see, but on each of these squares, let's look at first cousin, which is to the right of self. A first cousin, 866 is the average number of centimorgans that a first cousin will share with you. But the known range means someone has seen it and proven it is 396 to 1397. It's a huge range because remember with the gummy bear chart, right? Things are not black and white. On average, 866, but someone has seen a 396 and someone's seen a 1397 and lots of things in between. So when Tanya and I work, we look at what are the most probable. Like if they share 800 centimorgans, we go, what's the most probable? It's probably a first cousin if they're around the same age. But if they share 400, it could be a first cousin. We just won't make that our first going in assumption. When we're doing our work, if we find relationships that we can prove that are outside these ranges, we submit them. We've submitted 2 recently, which haven't been reflected in these yet, but they will be. I submitted a half aunt and niece that were 1497 or something, which is well above that 1315 at the top of that range. So these numbers are always changing as we learn more. But we use this chart daily. Because the other thing you can do with this chart is you can put a number in here. If these people match 200 centimorgans, I put the 200 in, and on the right, you can see it gives me the probable relationships. So in this case, the top 2 categories are the same. So there's a 90% chance that a 200 centimorgan falls in one of those relationships. But there's a 3% chance that it could be a half first cousin or a 1C, 1R, even though that's a really low number. So we use probabilities all the time. Nothing is set in stone, which is why when Ancestry says, this person is a second cousin, that's not true. They're estimating based on this same data. Okay, so let's say you did a test. Let's see what your results look like and how you analyze it. But was there another question before that?
Let's see. I think we're good. I say let's keep on going. Yeah.
Okay, I will carry on. Okay, so if you've done it, you will go and see, I'm using my own to show these things. You'll see, you go to your DNA results summary page, and you have 3 choices here. First is your origins, which is your ethnicity. Then is your DNA matches, which is key to what we do. And then is something called through lines, which we'll talk about. And you see, I don't have any there because my tree was private. Everyone loves the ethnicity bit. China and I look at this for our cases because it can be a hint. So here's mine. I'm Scottish, pale and freckled. Sometimes I'm more Irish, but right now I'm more Scottish because this is also crowdsourced data and it changes and they recalibrate it on a regular basis. But what it's never going to say is that I'm Chinese. I'm from this part of the world, just the percentages shift. It also does this cool thing for you where it can show migration patterns and show you that my ancestors came from here, but here are the places they migrated to. Right, so you can see that I have these 4 big communities that my ancestors migrated to. Okay, the DNA matches. This is the most important part for genetic genealogy. This is it. So you can see in my list, my parents have both tested, so they're both there, which is very helpful. There's my son. My daughter is actually on the list too. There's my full sister. So let's see, you can look at the numbers. With both my parents, I share 3,400 something, as I should. My child, 3,400, as I should. My sister, 2,584, that's right in line with a full sibling. Interestingly, if you look at my kids compared to each other, they're really low. 2,100, which some people say is a half sibling, but they're not. So, and we can prove that genetically, they're not half siblings. So again, it's squishy. But you can tell a lot. This is my Uncle Charlie and my Uncle Ed on my mom's side, and I share 893 and 770. This is should be one of my first hints that something is wrong, because I thought they were full uncles, but those are not full uncle numbers. So this is the kind of thing you can do with this data if you understand those centimorgans. You look immediately and go, whoa, something's off. The other important thing here is you have a lot of data about each match. So you have their name or whatever username. Let's look at down here, MICTH73. That's the username that he's put in the system. But I can click on his name and go to his Ancestry profile page. And on people's profile pages, sometimes it says, I live in Seattle, I'm researching the Thomas line, whatever. There's lots of things, and you can see what trees they have. Here's his first to second cousin. Again, that's ancestry estimating. What matters is the 759 centimorgans. And over on the right, you can see he has a tree, a public tree that I can go look at. So I can go look at who this guy thinks what he thinks his family tree looks like. There are also private trees and there are unlinked trees. There's all kinds of information. In mine, because my parents have tested, I can go divide up all my DNA matches by parent. Ancestry tries to estimate this now, but it's not usually right. It's not always right. So I would disregard it unless one of your parents is tested. But what I want to point out here is they again provide a lot of information. Lots of last names based on people's trees. And I can tell you that people's trees are not always right. So take it all with a little grain of salt. The common communities, and as far as I know, nobody in my family was from Wisconsin, so I find this disturbing. And which part of my ethnicity came from each parent. But what's the most important is that I have 50,000 DNA matches in Ancestry. 50,000. I mean, that's just so much data, right? So they give you some ways to slice and dice it. You can look at the top, all your matches, you can look by parent, you can look at, I have total typo, Ancestry, which is tree-based, which is the through lines, which we'll talk about. It's basically them doing genetic genealogy for you. And by location. And here you can see, if I want to see, do I have any ancestors that still live in Scotland? There's 18 there that might. Or not ancestors, relatives. Do I have any relatives that still live in Scotland? 18 of them might. So just more data that you can look at to help you keep analyzing. So let's look at MICTH73. If I click on him, if I click on his name here, I'll go to his profile page. But if I click on him first, I come here. I can see a little snapshot of the tree that he has out there. I can click here and look at his ethnicity and see how it compares to mine and which parts we share. And I can look at DNA matches we share. That means people on my list that he also shares DNA with. Okay. The green names are surnames that are also on my tree. If they're comparing our trees, they can see that those surnames are also on my tree. So I can tell already which side of the family I'm probably related to him on, because I don't match the names on his other side, which is all Dutch, and I'm not Dutch. If I looked at his ethnicity, you'll see he's half Dutch. Shared matches, there's a whole list, but the first one is my dad. So now I know he's on my father's side. Okay. And then I go to the rest of the list. And now we're going to do some genetic genealogy. So the first 3 people on this list, I know who they are. I actually know who MICTH is. He's my first cousin, Mike. NT is this kid, JT is this kid, Nuria is our other cousin's kid. So I know them, but the rest of these people I don't know. So to do genetic genealogy, what I want to do is figure out who they are and how they're related to me using all kinds of information. So one, I would look at their linked trees if they have one. Two, if they have an unlinked tree. So linked tree means they've taken their DNA results and said, this DNA belongs to this person on my tree. So they've connected that. Some people don't bother to do that, but I'd still go look at their trees, see what they think. Looking at these shared matches, that's again how I know all these people are probably on my father's side. You can look at their profile page, again, age, location, what they're researching, and records. If I put one of these people in my family tree, I then go research records on Ancestry. So I researched all these people. I figured out who Michael has a unusual name. I figured out who he was and was able to connect him to my tree. Nancy, I don't have any information about Nancy except Nancy Andrews. That's way too common. There's nothing I can do with that right now. Sean Skiles, also uncommon. I figured that one out. And then April Fleeler. I could not figure out April Fleeler. I was like, I have no idea who this is. We don't have anybody in common on our trees. What am I going to do? So I go and I look at April's tree. First of all, we match 164 centimorgans. So I put it in DNA Painter and say, who could she be? She could be a second cousin or a half second. She's pretty close, right? She's pretty close to me. 2C1R. I should know who this is. I looked at her tree and I went, okay, well, she has this placeholder here, and I just made it bigger for you, that is Thomas. So this looks like her great-grandfather is Thomas, right? But we don't know who Thomas. My dad's last name is Thomas, but it's a pretty common name, so I don't know about this. So I started digging into her grandmother, Mamie Dell Summers. Okay. Who is Mamie Dell Summers, and when was she married to or had a child with someone with the last name Thomas? And using records that you can find on Ancestry, anybody that's done family tree research has probably done it. I looked for birth records. I looked for death records. What I finally found was one census record where Mamie was listed as Mamie Thomas with a man named Carl. Carl is my great-grandfather. So I was like, oh my God, I figured it out. So this is like the summary of the genetic genealogy work that Tina and I do. I'm the orange box, and I took my name out. We're going to talk about that in a second. So I'm the orange box. Based on the people I knew on that list, my cousin Michael, Sean Skiles, I figured out that he descends from my grandfather's sister. Okay, I put the tree together. All right. Also, John Thomas on the right, he came out of a different database. He isn't in Ancestry, but I combine the data from all the different databases. I'm in all of them. So I look at my matches in 23andMe, I look at my matches in MyHeritage, and I try to put together my family tree. So what I discovered here was that my great-grandfather, Carl Jacob Thomas, I knew this, he had abandoned my great-grandmother, Layla, and no one ever knew what happened to him. Using the DNA, I figured out what happened to him. He went off and he married Mamie Summers. They had a daughter, Mary Nell. They actually had another child. And then these descendants are Michael, April, and Ginger, which none of us knew about. Turns out my grandfather, Hessler, had a half-sister, Mary Nell, that he never knew about. Ginger Bricker sent me a picture. I gasped. I'm like, oh my God, it's like my dad or my grandfather in a dress. Like, it's amazing. They look exactly alike. But there's this whole line of family that we didn't know about, but for these results. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop for more questions. So the orange box, I left myself out. In this case, we know it's me, and all these centimorgans are how these people are related to me. But if we're doing a case where someone's adopted, right, really, we don't know who they are genetically. If we're doing identifying the victim of a crime, a doe, I don't know whose DNA it is, but I can still build this tree around the orange box, right? We're solving a crime. There's DNA at the crime scene. I don't know whose DNA it is, but I can still build this tree and figure out how all these people in yellow are related to each other, and therefore where my orange box must go on this tree. Obviously, in this case, easy because there's a parent and kids, but if that wasn't there, I'd still have a ton of information to try to figure out where the orange box goes. And that's how we apply genetic genealogy to any kind of case, because you can still build these trees. And I'm going to stop there. I see some things coming through in the chat. So,
wow, this is fascinating. and when you make comments about the cases, I'm dying to know how you do the case. But let's see. Susan, okay, so Susan asks, can it show I can never pronounce it, indigenous tribes?
What it will show, if you are Native American or native from South America, it will say, it'll have like a region, like indigenous from, the Northwest or something. It doesn't tell you a tribe, but it will tell you if you carry that DNA. It just, okay, a lot of people test and think, oh, I was told my great grandmother is Native American, I'm going to test. Just because you don't have that DNA doesn't mean you're not. So we start with that. Two, there were always a lot of rumors. There were a lot of people historically that were people of color that were passing as Native American sometimes, or we have a lot of mixed up ethnicity where people were saying they were one thing when they're really another. I have a friend who tested and came back as 25% African. He's like, wait, what? I had no idea. I said, I'm pretty sure your Italian grandparents were not Italian. So it's interesting, but it will show you a region if you have the Native American or the indigenous DNA.
Okay, and then what's the best way to find out about inherited medical conditions?
Sure. So there is a website called Prometheus. I haven't used it, but it has a pretty good reputation. If you test with any of these other companies, if you test with Ancestry or 23andMe, I will start with those. You can download a data file of your DNA and upload it to other websites. And Prometheus is one of those. So if you test with Ancestry, you can download a file and then upload it to Prometheus, and it'll give you lots of health information. I believe that's the best one.
Okay, and let's see. Yes, okay. I found the website here, and yeah, it's not fancy. They basically ask you a bunch of questions before they're gonna do anything, I think. This is
I can send you all the links for where you can upload if you test with one of the two. And I would test with one of those two. I would test with Ancestry because their database is bigger.
okay.
But if you can't upload to Ancestry or 23andMe, so you can't cross those. So if you were to test and you really want all the information possible, I'd test with both of those, and then you can download your file and upload to MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA, Prometheus, and there's a ton of others. But I can see if people are interested, I can send you like a little sheet of walk through the steps to go through and where to upload.
Oh, that's great. I'll just put that with the recording link, so that
Okay.
could be helpful to folks.
Perfect.
Great. Now, when you're advising people, you had just sort of thrown it out there that there's more of a community, I guess, in Ancestry. Is that what you advise people to go with if they're just looking for the best thing to kind of map out their family tree?
Yeah, so my advice is to start with Ancestry. It has, hold on, my dog is trying to like kill a pillow.
Of course, it always happens this way.
It's already dead. Yeah, I advise people to start with Ancestry because it has the largest database. So you'll get more DNA matches in there. It also has my favorite tree making tool, and the records are great. So I think it's the best place to start. But a lot of people, depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for relatives in another country, MyHeritage is Israeli owned and used extensively in Europe. So I recommend people, like my dad's wife wants to find her Finnish and Swedish relatives. So we had her test with Ancestry, download and upload to MyHeritage. There are a lot more people in that database that actually live in those countries. So if you're looking for, I'm Italian and I want to find my ancestors in Italy, you upload to MyHeritage. And there's one for the UK, there's one that's more used by France. So it sort of depends on exactly what you're looking for. And if you're adopted, I say you do them all, upload everywhere, because there are different people in every database, and every database has different tools available to analyze.
Now, do
But
most
always
of these
start with Ancestry.
do most of these have sort of a free version, or do you have to sort of pay for all of these?
So you always have to pay for the DNA test.
Okay.
And if anyone wants to do Ancestry, it's $99, but it goes on sale almost every holiday for $59. So
Okay.
wait till a holiday and buy it for $59. Yeah, so you pay for the test and then you get to see your test results free. And there are always things you can do for free, but the paid versions give you access to other people's trees, to the records, to other tools within them. But once you like MyHeritage or Family Tree DNA, you can upload for free and see your results. But then you need to pay if you want to do more stuff.
Kathy asks, to what extent do you have any control over your genetic data? And I guess that's when you upload this into a system like that.
Yeah, that's a great question, which I'm going to talk about it a little more later. But basically, number one, well, once it goes in there, you know, a lot of them are selling data, but like as like a chunk. They're not like, here's Kathy's data, right? They're selling it as a big group for, you know, research purposes, whatnot. But number two, you can spit in the tube and send it in and use a fake name. There's no chain of custody on this DNA, so it can't be used. Like they would, people are worried they'll use it to like take away your health insurance. They can't even prove it's yours, right? So I have someone on my list named Megan, but it's really her boyfriend Jake's DNA, and Jake is my cousin. So they have no way to prove whose DNA it is. Two, and I'll talk about it a little more later. Well, I'll talk about it now. So my plug is if anyone tests and wants to help law enforcement, when Tynan and I do our crime cases, we don't use Ancestry, we don't use 23andMe, we can only use two databases, Family Tree and GEDmatch, and we can only see the results of people who said yes, they opted in to help law enforcement. So we only get a tiny fraction. I think we figured out the other day it was 1% of the people who have tested opt in for law enforcement. It's tiny, tiny, tiny. And we're still solving cases this way. But all we can see and all law enforcement can see is the username you put into the system, the email address you put into the system, and how many centimorgans of DNA you share with the person we're trying to identify. That's it. I can't tell anything else.
Okay, cool.
So as far as controlling your health information, there's not that much out there, and they can't prove it's yours anyway.
Okay. And out of curiosity, because you've brought up, you know, the crime aspect of this, is how many cases have you been involved in where you've gone to one of these databases and looked up DNA or anything like that? Or does that happen?
Well, so what we do is exactly what I showed you. It's just in a different database. So let's say my DNA was found at a crime scene and they want to figure out who I am. They would upload the DNA file. They would process the DNA in a certain way. They would upload it to the two that law enforcement is allowed to use, Family Tree and GEDmatch. They would upload it, and in each database, we would get a list of people that share DNA with the person they're looking for. So you would get my list of relatives from Family Tree and GEDmatch, right? But only those that had opted in to help law enforcement. So it'd be a much shorter list and much more distant relatives than what you saw here. And so based on that list of people, I would get their username, their email, and how many centimorgans they share with me. And then they would try to figure out who I was. So like looking at this chart, let's say they upload to GEDmatch and John Thomas on the right, 100 centimorgans is the first person on the list. First of all, Tynan and I would be delighted to have a 100 centimorgan match in one of our crime cases. If we get one over 100, we're pretty happy. So then you would have to take John Thomas and figure out who is John Thomas? How is he related to anyone else on this list of people? And you would try to build a tree like this and then figure out what are all the places that the owner of the DNA could be on this family.
Okay, cool. All right. I think we got the questions that have come in, so
okay.
We can keep on going.
Let me whip through a couple more things. When we're researching, we use tons of information, like all of these. I showed you DNA Painter, which is so important, ancestry records, newspapers. Old newspapers are amazing if you're doing any kind of genealogical research. Articles, I learned tons about people through newspaper articles in my own family. Plantations in the South A lot of them have websites now, and they're providing all the information they have about people who were enslaved there. So those are very helpful. Genealogy Bank is full of obituaries. Obituaries are amazing. Oh, and Family Search, the one in the top middle, that's the Church of Latter-day Saints. That's their records, and they have amazing records, and that's free to go research. Tina and I have used all of these. I use Facebook all the time to learn about living people. We buy books about family history off eBay and Amazon. I solved a whole case off Pinterest once because someone posted all their old family photos and labeled all their relatives. And as Tina would say, not everything is online, and sometimes you have to go to the library or read a family Bible or look at microfiche or old phone book or old yearbooks, and they're just full of information. So we don't rule out any sources of data. All right, some challenges when you're researching. Okay, 100 years ago, people changed the way they spelled their name on a regular basis. The census takers changed the way it was spelled. They went from their first name to their middle name to a nickname. They changed their last names. They changed their birthdays. Women get a lot younger on the census reports, and men get older on draft paperwork because they want to be drafted and go to the military. Bad handwriting, like it's all over. Oh, and men name their sons after themselves all the time. So you'll have 17 John Smiths in a row, and you got to sort out which one is which. And then, of course, we talked about marrying within the group or between families. There are a shocking number of families where there are multiple marriages between families. And your match is adopted. A lot of people test because they're adopted and they're trying to figure it out. So you can't get information about them because they don't have it. But sometimes you can help them because they're part of your family somewhere. Tips and tricks. It's an art and a science. We start with the science of the DNA, but even that's kind of gray, as we saw. And then we go through the records, and then we kind of come back to like, where could Melanie fit on this tree? All right, DNA doesn't lie, and it might not match the documentation. So if you get a result back that is surprising, it's not inaccurate. Only the most distant relatives on your list probably don't really descend from the same ancestors. Like I share 7 centimorgans with a lot of people because we all came from Ireland, but we can't possibly trace the common ancestor. Naming conventions vary a lot depending if your background is Italian or Mexican or Swedish. The way names get passed down is very different. You got to kind of learn them. And we consider all family stories to be hints, right? Like sometimes the work we do proves a family myth, and sometimes it disproves it. So everything is a hint. Okay, this is just a list, and we don't have tons of time left, but this is just a list of some of the craziest things Tina and I have seen doing our cases. Like, you wouldn't believe the stuff that's out there. And my point here being, doing your DNA can really illuminate a lot of stuff you didn't know about. Some people that's a big draw, and some people that's I don't ever want to touch it. So you just got to know. Okay, what else can you do with this? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I had a friend of mine who knew that I did, because I discovered by accident that I was related to, that I'm a Mayflower descendant, and so I did the Mayflower Society, and I went down to DAR and all that stuff and put it all together, and he called me so upset because his family took their French heritage so seriously. This guy was actually a French pastry chef, and took the test and discovered they had no French background, that their Italian relative who they thought was French had literally just immigrated, and but it really bothered him. But I mean, I thought it was a fascinating story, but I can understand how if you really put a lot of identity into something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have a case now we're still trying to work out where the guy's like, my mom said her father was Chinese. And I'm like, yeah, no, he's Indian, like not Chinese. So there's you learn so much stuff. There are people who test and it comes back, they're 50% Ashkenazi Jewish. They're like, I'm not Jewish at all. Those people have found out their dad isn't their dad. They were switched at birth. I mean, there's just.
Okay. Let's see. Someone says, excellent event. What exactly is available through the Ellis Island records?
Oh, that is an excellent question. And that is actually a question for my business partner, Tynan. Tynan, can you like
Throw it into chat, Tynan.
throw it in chat or talk to us or something? Do you know what's available with Ellis Island?
And then let's see. Angela says, we tried to track family history of my German mother, but we were told all the records were destroyed during the war. Do you have any suggestions for something like that?
Yeah, so this is true for quite a few people. Ireland has a similar problem. Everything was destroyed during their uprisings, during the fighting. Church records, so like in Ireland, church records still exist, but the civil records don't. Um, Germany, Germany is a tough one, but what I love about doing the genetic genealogy, right, is we can piece things together. So I have a friend who his last name is Anderson, but they're not Scandinavian. He's like, I don't know what we are, but the name was changed. By looking at his DNA matches, I was able to piece together some other people that had slightly more information and figured out that his name was Andrzejewski and it was Russian, and pieced them together and figured out where the brothers were. So sometimes the records don't exist. Sometimes they exist in churches versus in government. And then sometimes someone had a family Bible and they built their tree and they're in your matches and you can go work it out that way and you can message them and get their information.
Okay, excellent. And then let's see, Susan says, my grandmother came in through Ellis Island and you can get a copy of the ship log that they came in on.
Yeah, there are a lot of ship logs. That's a great point, Susan. There are a lot of ship logs out there. They're handwritten sometimes. They haven't been transcribed. You got to read through. But if you can find the person you're looking for on a ship, you can tell it's them by, are they with the right family members? Did they come from the right town? Who were they coming to see in the US? A lot of people had to put who they're going to come see in the US. And you go, oh, I know that person from the tree. So this makes sense. So there are a lot of ship's logs out there with lists of passengers. Not a lot of information, but you can often find it.
And then and Tynan did share, she says Ellis Island has a fabulous website, ship manifest, passenger list, gold mines, names of relatives. And I dropped that into chat. And Perfect. Then somebody asks, in 23andMe, I have 1,500 relatives. Is that normal? I remember my mother mentioning my grandfather was a sperm donor. just wondering.
Okay, well, just remember, I have 50,000 in Ancestry. So
wow.
The number, this actually sounds like a very low number to me, which maybe means that there are some foreign, like you have foreign relatives that aren't using the database you use. So it just depends. It just depends. And if he was a sperm donor, you will most likely find descendants of his sperm donation children in there, and you could probably piece that family together.
Okay, great. Wow. Once again, it blows my mind on these discussions because we burned through an hour and we could probably go another hour on this. But this has really been fascinating. And like I said, let's see, Grace says, is there any way to distinguish identical twins' legacy trees?
Well, I don't, is there any way to establish, I don't know what legacy trees mean.
Yeah, okay.
But identical twins this way, no.
Okay.
No, they'll come up as the same person.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, that's wild.
And kids of identical twins will come up as the children of the opposite twin.
Holy cow. Boy,
yeah.
That's probably pretty interesting.
It confuses everything.
Yeah. No, this has been great. And I think until I did it, like I had this, I never understood how people could have a hobby of genealogy. It's sort of like, oh, you do your family tree and then you're done. But but it really provokes a lot of curiosity in terms of like now I want to go up to Bridgewater, Massachusetts and see where my ancestors came over and where they lived and sort of chart their course. It really, you could do this forever. And
yeah. Okay. So let me just make a couple more plug. Number one, if you want to do this, you want to help law enforcement, I put it in red, not MyHeritage, but GEDmatch and Family Tree. If you upload there and opt in to help law enforcement, we thank you profusely. Number two, we were talking about the stuff. I want to end with the stuff.
Okay.
Like all of these family tree tools. What I love is when people go in, and I've done some of this, I have old family photos that nobody else has. And I scan them in and I attach them to my tree. And then someone else researching goes, oh my God, she has a picture of Blanche. That's amazing, right? Some people hate that. They don't want people taking their pictures. I view it as a sharing thing. Like if you have family photos of my family that I don't have, I messaged someone because my great grandmother wrote a postcard about how Lily died of something. I found Lily's family and I gave them a copy of the postcard. So you can take a lot of that stuff and upload it, right? Upload the documentation, my great grandfather's military documents, upload those, share those with others, share the photos. There's just so much you can do with this. And I know you've had the artifacts group come talk to you, right? I love what she's doing with artifacts. I'm probably going to do that for my mom, like a way to save all these things without saving a box of stuff that's going to mold, right? So I do a lot of scanning and posting as a way to get the whole family story together, and the newspaper articles. And it's just a great way to pull all those pieces together in one place. And yes, you could do this forever because you find out something new and a lot of the research changes, or you just get more details. Like I've learned things about, I have a great grandfather that everyone hated. They said he was mean. I learned that his parents were raging alcoholics and he was abandoned as a child in a cold apartment. Okay, you know what? I might be mean too. Okay, so now I have a new appreciation of my great grandfather. So you just never know what you're going to find out. It's fascinating always.
Oh, I love it. And Tynan says, as they say, genealogists never retire; they just become full-time genealogists, and that's the case of the two of you.
Absolutely.
Well, this has really been a wonderful, fascinating discussion, and I believe it was Angela Baker who introduced us, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I see that she's in the audience, and she is one
and
of
her
our
mother's an identical twin. So there we go.
wow. Oh, I see that. Yeah, and Angela's one of our positive aging community champions. She's a realtor that specializes in helping adults.
Wait, I see Susan's suggestion.
Susan.
More, please. Please have another talk on how to store and share family info and photos.
Okay. Now we've done a lot of the storage stuff. If you go to our website, you can find some really interesting discussions we've had on cataloging photos and things like that. It's going to be an ongoing discussion that
well, and Rich says hundreds of slides. I need to scan slides, Susan. I have all my mother's slides. And Rich says more, please. If you guys let Steve know what else you'd love to learn about this stuff. Oh, Linda, email me. If you want to learn more about this, any specific thing, talk to Steve. I'd be happy to come back and talk further about getting more details about stuff if there's a specific thing people want to really dig into.
Yeah, and that really holds true for all topics, even beyond this one. Just email me if there's something that you want us to dive into, and we will do our best to find an author or an expert that could come and talk about it. And yeah, isn't it funny? We talked about genetic genealogy. That's what I said. It's what to do with our stuff is one of our top topics. If we open the door, you can really see okay. And Melanie mentioned artifacts. Yeah, I'm going to drop artifacts into the chat. It's a really cool company that basically you can upload your photos and then you can tell the story about the photos, and it's pretty cool. And I'm doing my best to get those guys website here.
It's really cool.
And let's see, Grace said, that's what I meant by the legacy tree. Does one child really belong to the one twin or the parent or the other? So you answered that question there. And then with more marriages out of and between ethnicities, I wonder what that will mean for future generations testing their DNA. It
shows all of that. It shows the breakdown. I mean, again, estimates based on crowdsourcing, but it definitely
Yeah.
shows the breakdown and provides information you wouldn't otherwise have known sometimes.
And Tynan, thanks for throwing the Artifacts website in there. We've done a discussion with them as well. But if you go under the recordings at proaging.com, and I can't get there really quick, but if you go under the recordings and you go to the left, you'll see like different subjects. And if you click on the one that says what to do with our stuff, you'll find a bunch of the discussions that we've had on this topic. And I'm going to catalog this one there as well, because I think it really relates. So, well, thanks so much, Melanie. What you're doing is fascinating. And I hope I never land on your list for the real profession. I'm going to try to stay the straight and narrow here, but
Good idea.
But I think it's great.
Well, thank you guys so much for having us. It was really fun, and I'd be happy to anyone. Wait, hold on, I said email. I just told someone to email me, but let me.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
there's my email address, mtarmstrong@throughlinconsultants.com. So if anyone is interested, the person that said they were adopted, anyone, just feel free to email. We'd be happy to help.
Great. And I'll make sure that I have those links to both you and Tynan in the at the recording as well.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Everybody have a great day.